If you guys are considering moving to Denver, Colorado, this video is a must watch. It's not all positive, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. This video is actually gonna be 5 reasons why you might not want to move to Denver this year. I'm a super positive guy, I always have very positive messages in my videos, but on this one, I wanna kind of take a little bit different of an approach and just share with you some things from myself as a 40-year plus Colorado native that have kind of made me second guess living here in the Mile High City. If you guys are interested in that at all, make sure you watch this video because there's a lot of great content and I'm excited to share it with you. Let's go. All right, so as I said, today's gonna be a little bit different. We're gonna talk about 5 reasons why I think might be worth considering or at least diving deeper into on your own to decide whether or not Denver, Colorado is the right place for you. But before we get started, as always, my name's Adam Lang. I'm a licensed realtor here in Denver and I'm a Colorado native. I love living here, so I'm a little bit biased with some of the stuff I'm gonna share with you today, but I really think more than anything, it's important to have kind of 2 sides to every story and just to have different perspectives on some of the reasons why people do love living here in Denver, Colorado, but also why other people decide to leave after a few years. So we're gonna talk about all of that today. But before we get started, if you guys have any questions at all, make sure you guys reach out. Phone number, email, all that info is down below. I would love just the opportunity to connect with you. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and get started. Again, 5 reasons why you might want to reconsider moving out here to Denver, Colorado, the Mile High City. All right, so we're jumping right into this with number 1, which is going to be the rising cost of living out here. I've seen Denver change an incredible amount over the last 4 decades. And the one thing that has really been, I think, accelerated in the last decade or so is just the cost of living out here and how much it really does take as a family or just as an individual to survive and to be able to afford buying a home. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some specifics, but before we do that, I just also want to make the point that different parts of the country have different pros and different cons. And I think with Colorado in general, you are gonna be paying more for your housing. It might be a little bit more than maybe that 30 to 40% that typically is kind of what you should spend on your living expenses or on your house. But with Colorado, we have so many cool outdoor activities and just the lifestyle that it provides that it's really hard to put a dollar amount on that, and why it's okay to maybe push the envelope a little bit and have your cost of living and your living expenses be a bit higher in a place like out here in Colorado. So, if you guys are at least getting the most out of living out here, the lifestyle that it provides, getting up to the mountains, just enjoying all of the great, healthy, active lifestyle stuff that's available out your back door, then I think that's just something else to consider when I start talking through some of these more specific points here. So right off the bat, let's just talk about the Denver home prices. So at the beginning of this year in 2025, in the spring, the average home price was right around $652,000. And that's actually 58% higher than the national average. So significant difference from other parts of the country when you live here in Denver. One of our biggest news stations, 9 News, recently put out an article that I thought was really fascinating, where they were just talking about how much money you need to make to really comfortably live here in Denver. And they were actually saying that the household income needs to be about $168,000. So I was rounding that up and just saying $170,000. That is a lot of money, especially for an individual, even in today's times. So, you can imagine why a lot of people are just giving it a shot, but after a couple years, if they're just not able to put that kind of income into their pockets, they're gonna be leaving and just, looking for other places around the country that might be a bit more affordable. And then I just wanna go a little bit further on this. So you have that $168,000 amount that you really need to live comfortably. Well, the median income in Denver right now is under $100,000. In fact, the Denver household median income I saw recently reported as $91,000, which is, almost half of what they're saying you really need to comfortably live here. So a massive gap between those two. But let's just assume maybe you're not ready to buy a home. Maybe you're just looking to come out here and rent. Maybe you just want to, kind of dip your toe in the water and see if Denver's even the right spot for you. Well, even the average rental out here is still much higher than maybe what you're used to back home. I recently saw that a 2-bedroom apartment average in Denver was just about $2,800 a month. That's obviously a significant amount of money just to be paying for rent. So I have a lot of friends and people that have moved out here and relocated to just kind of test it out for a year and rent first before buying. And they even get to the point where they even have to, get a roommate, just to share that other bedroom with them when they come out here. Or a lot of people, let's just be honest, a lot of people today are working remotely. They're working from home. So if you're renting, you might actually end up needing to rent, for example, a 3-bedroom apartment just so you have that extra dedicated room for your office. So the rental amounts too can, get pretty high pretty quick. And then just to close out this first point, I've also recently saw on Axios that starter homes can really only fit about 10% of the budget for people that are living here in Denver. So only 10% of people living in the Denver area have the ability to afford purchasing that first starter home. So, if you're trying to get started and just kind of, getting going in this real estate game, it's challenging. But it's definitely not impossible, and I still have a lot of first-time home buyers reaching out to me. So not to do a plug here, but again, all that info down below. Feel free to reach out, and even if you're kind of on the fence and just not sure if it's even a possibility right now for you, there's a lot of stuff that we can talk through and just some valuable resources I'll share with you. So reach out, I'd love to connect with you. But again, let's go ahead and talk about the next point and move on. All right, so hopefully you're still sticking around. You haven't gotten so scared that you've went on to a different YouTube video. If you're still watching, I'm proud of you because, like I said earlier, there are some kind of two sides of every story. And while I am sharing reasons why you maybe don't want to move to Denver, I think there's a lot of strategies where you can still make it a reality for yourselves, no matter what the circumstance. So let's talk now about the second point. And this is just to talk a little bit more about the weather. And weather is one of these topics that I know a lot of other YouTube videos talk about. But what I want to talk to you specifically about is just how it really is, I think, a pro and a con, because it keeps life interesting, but there is a lot of just other things you need to consider when you think about weather. And this includes things like home insurance, as well as just the quality of life you might have depending on what part of town you live in. So we're gonna talk about a lot of that stuff right now. So not to keep quoting 9 News, but they are my favorite news station. And another article that I saw earlier this year, they were talking about how Denver actually recently ranked as one of the most unpredictable weather cities on record anywhere. So Denver has a lot of different things that you might not be expecting. And I think a lot of people that reach out to me that are from out of state and they just are maybe curious about the weather in Colorado, 2 things that I always get from people. The first one is they ask me about how I've heard that Denver has 300 days of sunshine a year, and that is kind of a selling point that has been around forever, as long as I can remember. But I think what's more important is also understanding that Denver isn't just about sunshine and then tons of snow for all the skiing. Obviously Colorado gets a lot of media exposure with the X Games up in Aspen and just all the amazing skiing we have out here. But it's really a lot more than just that snow and the sunshine. So just a couple quick examples to share with you. So March can always be one of these months that's always unpredictable. You're not really sure what to expect. And actually this year in 2025, we had 17 days that were significantly higher than the average. And it was one of the warmest in history here in Colorado. So this was a great March, in my opinion, as far as it just being beautiful weather. And that's not typical. Normally it's later in the year, like late April, early May, when you start to see these beautiful sunny days on a more regular basis. But let's go back a year, and even I think 2 years ago, one of the biggest snowstorms I'd ever seen happened in March. I think we had like over 2 feet of snow that came down in just a couple days. So it could be, literally 100 degrees difference from one year to the next. One year we might have below 0 temps. Another year we might have something like March this year where it was in the 70s. So overall, just very unpredictable. So I think though what's most unexpected with people that come out to Denver is a couple things. First off, it's hail, and then also it's just some wind. So we don't have a ton of wind depending on what part of town you live in, but wind is definitely something that, especially in the spring and also in the fall, you are going to see a little bit more of. It's oftentimes when you have these big temperature swings where it might be really warm down below and maybe still a little bit cooler up in the mountains. Anytime you have those differences in temperatures, that creates wind. So we do have a lot of wind in certain parts of Denver. If that's a big concern, feel free to reach out. But one of the areas that I always just talk to my clients about is in the northwestern part of Arvada, in areas like Candelas and also Leyden Rock. Both awesome places, really nice newer communities that have been built over the last 20 years. But they definitely get their fair share of wind because they are right up against the mountains going west up into the foothills. So that would be an example of an area that does have quite a bit of wind. But when it comes to hail, there really is no rhyme or reason. Anywhere in town can get significantly hit with hail. I'm actually filming today in my house because we had a little bit of unpredictable weather outside today, go figure. A little bit windy, so it's kind of hard to take the camera outside. But just 1 year ago, so June of 2024, we had this insane hailstorm here. It actually was to the point where it damaged all of my windows, my roof, had to completely get everything replaced. Luckily, it was covered under insurance. So that's a big one when it comes to Colorado, is understanding that home insurance is a very, very important thing to have on your house, and just to make sure that you have the right type of coverage to include stuff like hail damage and even some of this intense wind. So just a couple little tips for you. And actually, when it comes to hail, Denver has actually been ranked as one of the most hail-prone cities in all of America. So it's not just me saying this, it's legitimate. And it's something that kind of goes in waves, like 1 year we'll have a ton of it, a lot of hailstorms, a lot of really intense, severe thunderstorms. And then you might have another year where you don't really have much of that at all. So it really does kind of ebb and flow a bit, but just overall, don't underestimate the power and just the intensity of some of the weather we get out here in Colorado. All right, so now let's talk about the third reason why Denver might not be the best place for you, depending on what's important to you. And this one is going to talk about metro tax districts and also HOAs. So HOAs is an acronym for Homeowner Association, and that's just any development of homes that has a governing body that usually has a monthly fee and a little bit of restrictions, also sometimes known as covenants. And HOAs definitely have their pros and their cons. I live in an HOA actually right now in Grant Ranch, which is in Littleton, and I actually really enjoy it. I like having an HOA because it really helps kind of monitor the entire neighborhood with making sure that just neighbors aren't, letting their homes kind of go to waste. They're not having a broken down car in their driveway, or maybe they buy an RV or a trailer or a boat, and instead of having it stored somewhere else, they decide we're just gonna keep it in the driveway when we're not using it. Stuff like that can be an eyesore, so I like how HOAs kind of take that off of the homeowner, where I don't have to have that awkward conversation with my next door neighbor. And it just, I think, brings the entire neighborhood up a couple levels when it comes to just how everything looks. Everything's more pristine and well kept, and I like that. But I will talk now, though, about why a lot of people don't like HOAs or these metro tax districts, and that can just come down to the fact that they're expensive. If you're maybe looking to buy a home and maybe your price point that you don't want to go above is $500,000, and you find a home that's maybe $480,000, well, to still qualify to buy that, your lender, if you're doing a loan, is still going to look at what other costs are going to be associated with owning that home, and that's going to include your HOAs. So if you have HOA fees that are maybe $500 a month, maybe you're in a really nice place where it's a lot of amenities. They've got a clubhouse and a pool and a bunch of parks and trails, all that kind of stuff. That could be a more expensive HOA on a monthly fee. That now might actually take you out of being able to qualify to purchase that home. So something to definitely keep in mind and just be aware of when you start looking for homes, that in addition just to the cost of the home, there are a few other things that could potentially also go into what you're able to qualify for if you're getting a mortgage, a home loan. So there's also, outside of HOAs, there's also what's called a metro tax district. And these are pretty common in new build communities. And I've used this in a few other videos in case you guys are regular watchers of my YouTube channel. But what metro tax district, one of these could be an example of down in areas like Sterling Ranch, which is pretty close to me. It's also in Littleton. It's southwest of here in southwestern Littleton. And it's an awesome new build community. Actually, I think it's one of my favorites. But one of the things that always catches my clients off guard when I take them to look at homes over there is how expensive the taxes are. So typically in Colorado, or let me rephrase that, typically in Denver, the average rate for a tax, for an annual tax rate, is about 0.4, so right around 0.5%. So if you buy a $500,000 home, you should be expecting to pay around $2,500 annually for your property taxes. You go to places though, like Sterling Ranch, there's also some other new build communities down in other areas like southeastern Aurora. There's really new build communities all over the state, but these are just a few that I'm more familiar with. You know, there could, for example, instead of being at like 0.5%, they could be as high as 1.5%. So an extra full percentage point higher on your annual property taxes. So, you know, that same example, let's just say you buy a $500,000 house in an area that has a lower tax, maybe Wheat Ridge or Lakewood, and it's maybe about 0.5%, you're paying $2,500 a year. Sterling Ranch at 1.4%, all of a sudden you're paying almost $7,500 a year, and that's a significant difference. So just something to keep in mind if you start looking at homes. When you're looking at them on Zillow, or maybe you connect with a realtor like myself, I'll put you on a custom home search. And one thing that's really important is always just to look at that line item on the property, you know, when you're viewing properties, and to see what the taxes are. And then also start to look at HOAs and see if there's any HOAs, and just take both of those into consideration. Definitely really important to keep those at the top of your just radar when you're starting to go a little bit more in depth on searching for homes. All right, so let's just jump right into number 4. So the fourth reason why I think you might want to, at least dig a little deeper into whether or not Denver's the right spot for you is just something that's really changed a lot over the past, I'd say maybe 5 years, and that's the transient community that we have here in Denver. When I grew up, pretty much everybody that I knew, was born and raised in Denver, and they were still here in high school, and a lot of people went in-state for college and even moved back to close to their kind of hometown area to kind of start their adult lives. And I think that is still the case for a lot of people that grew up here in Colorado, just because we're spoiled and we don't want to go anywhere else because we've already found such an awesome place to live. But for people that are moving to Denver recently, I think it all comes back to some of the other points that I've talked about, where it's a little bit more transient because I think people move out here and then they just don't realize how expensive it is to live here. And if they don't have a stable job and maybe a little bit of extra money in the bank as savings, they might last a year or two and then they end up, kind of going somewhere else that's more affordable. So the transient community is actually something that doesn't get talked about as much, but is definitely, I think, worth, for yourselves, just thinking about a little bit, because when you start to socialize and build out good friendships with people, it's a bummer when you meet great friends and have different families you start connecting with, and then they're gone a year or two later because Denver just ends up not being the right spot for them. One of the other websites I often look at is Axios, and I actually saw on their website recently that they ranked Denver as one of the most transient communities in the entire country. So it's not just me saying that, there is definitely some substance behind this to back it up. I think this is probably the case with most metropolitan areas, most cities, but in Denver, only about 21% of the residents, and this is more in that downtown core part of Denver, only about 21% of the residents are homeowners. And that's compared to about 49% statewide. So if you're somebody that really is looking for an urban environment to call home, if you're really, somebody that wants to be where all the action is, like downtown part of Denver, just be aware that that is especially an area that is even more transient, where people really are kind of coming and going and just really not setting up their roots there. And again though, to play devil's advocate, there's really not a ton of housing options in that part of Denver. So that could be a little bit of playing into this as well. Some of the other areas that are really close to downtown Denver also can be very expensive. One example you guys have maybe heard of before is an area called Washington Park. We call it Wash Park, and that would be an area that is very expensive, some of the most expensive homes in the Denver area, and is very close to downtown Denver. So, it also could just be a matter of the lack of affordability for people to be able to afford a $2 million home. I think with this talk also about the transient community, what I've noticed is just how different downtown Denver is, especially what we call 16th Street Mall. Just kind of the main central hub of downtown Denver. It's a pedestrian mall, and it was incredibly vibrant back in the day. All the restaurants, businesses, there's just a lot going on, and it was a fun place to visit. And they're doing a huge improvement there. I think it was like $200 million improvement that Denver's been investing into getting this up to better standards. But even still, I was down there a couple weeks ago, and a ton of homeless population, a lot of just trash, a lot of just vacant buildings. It's to the point even now where a lot of these massive skyscrapers are actually getting purchased by developers that are able to rezone them as residential, and they're actually turning a lot of these into apartments. So a big kind of shift when it comes to kind of what's going on downtown Denver, but I'm hoping that it gets better in the future. But that's, I think, the real like epicenter of where I noticed this whole transient topic, this transient issue being the worst, or at least the most visible, is in that downtown Denver 16th Street Mall area. All right, and let's talk about this fifth and final reason why Denver is worth talking a little bit more about as far as whether or not it's the right spot for you. And this has to do with crime. And I'm not gonna go into specifics because I want you guys to do your own homework on that. But there's a great few websites that I'll recommend, one of them being niche.com. They have a lot of really good just data when it comes to schools, crime, all that kind of stuff. And just to give you though at least a couple little data points to think about, denvercrimes.com is another great website, and they had something recently go out that said that for Denver property crimes, so crimes related to property, there was 38.2 out of every 1,000 residents reported property-related crimes. I also saw that last year in 2024, even just vehicle-related crimes, theft, that kind of stuff, it was over $500 million worth of claims and damages. And to go even a little further on this, Denver was ranked last year as having the 4th worst crime when it comes to auto-related crimes in the entire nation. But that's actually some good news, because the year prior to that, it was at the #1 spot in the entire nation for auto-related crimes. So we're going in the right direction at least, but still, I think got a long ways to go. And I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, other than maybe just a lot of kind of, again, transient community maybe coming to Denver, just people that are, kind of doing whatever they have to do to survive. I don't know, but hopefully we'll see that go in the right direction and continue to improve in the future. This isn't by any means a fact or science, but I have had a lot of people talk about some of the areas that are typically the worst with crime, or any areas that are seeing massive amounts of development and growth. And I actually, be honest with you guys, I had my house broken into while I was trying to sell it a few years back in the Sloan Lake area. And they actually shared with me this specific exact same reason, where in developing areas, there's a lot of construction going on. And with that construction, there's a lot of tools and just a lot of stuff that's a little bit easier for people to potentially find and steal than more developed, mature neighborhoods. So something to think about. In Denver, we have a lot of areas that are seeing a lot of growth right now, but that might be something that you want to think about if you are kind of identifying specific neighborhoods that might be places you want to buy a house. So think about that, and if you guys have questions about my personal experience, or just want to talk through maybe some areas that I think might be good possibilities for you to look into, just let me know. All right, you guys, well, I hope you're still watching. I hope you didn't get so scared that you moved on to another video, or you're on Google searching homes in the Midwest, or looking into moving to the Sun Belt in America. Hopefully you're still serious about Colorado, and despite these 5 things that kind of have pros and cons associated with them, what I really wanted to do on this video is just to share with you guys some things to maybe consider, do your own homework, dive a little deeper into, because once you've done that, you have a much more thorough understanding of everything that you're going to face here in Denver, and just be able to have a more confident decision-making process whenever that time does come. I'm 42 years old. I still live here. It's my favorite place ever. I love Denver. I love the mountains. It is an incredible place to live. So I hope you guys at least give it a chance to come out and see that for yourselves. And I want to also just recommend that if you have already been out here before, try and come out again, but come in a different season. That'll really help give you a different perspective on some of the stuff that I've shared with you today, especially that stuff about like the weather. Maybe you've come out in the summertime, try coming out like in the late fall, maybe October or November, and just see what it's like at that time of year. Or maybe, the winter or the early spring. All 4 seasons are different. I think they all have their cool, unique things about them that make them great, and also a few things that, might be a little bit frustrating. But the good thing is, since we have 4 seasons, those don't last too long. Before you know it, you're on to the next season, and you got new stuff to be excited about, whether it be the outdoor activities that you're doing, or just picking something new to try for the first time in that next season. Guys, I really enjoyed sharing this one with you today. And last but not least, that link down below hit that subscribe button. I release videos every single week, and I would just love to hopefully start connecting with you on a more regular basis. And if you haven't already, make sure you guys download my latest Locals Guide to Denver. It's got over 20 of my favorite neighborhoods, all the best parks, bars, restaurants, farmers markets, pretty much anything you can think of. I include it in this guide. It's completely free. You can grab it on my website at adamsellsdenver.com, or you can just scan that QR code on the bottom of the screen. And until next week, I look forward to seeing you guys then. Hope you have a good one, and I'll see you then. Bye.